it appears on your screen, and we can keep moving. Please note to our disclaimer, this session is intended to be informational and educational and does not constitute medical or legal advice. So please consult your health care providers or legal advisors to advise you regarding your personal situation. And AARP is not responsible for the consequences of any decision or action taken in reliance upon or as a result of the information provided during this event. So, hey, let's get started. Let's take a short survey on the audience today. So when you see it up on the screen, please answer as quickly as you can some of these wonderful questions. So the very first question is, how often do you have trouble sleeping? Is it every night, several nights a week, occasionally, rarely, or never? I don't know about the never, but what do you guys think? Okay, we'll give you a few more minutes. I see them really coming in. And so far, every night. Oh my goodness, that's a big number. And then several nights a week and occasionally. Well, that's about right. I'm glad nobody said rarely or never because everybody has trouble sleeping periodically. So that's good. Okay, great. Thanks. So let's go to the next one. So the next one is, have you ever tried medication or anything to help you sleep?
There's the answers already up there.
There are? Okay, because I can't see it on here. Meditation, melatonin, or sleep medications, exercise, aromatherapy, music, or other. Well, it seems like definitely that meditation is definitely on high. Medication is right behind it. Exercise and stretching. Okay, aromatherapy, music, and other. Perfect, perfect. Wow, these are some great answers. Thank you so very much for sharing. And thank you for participating in our poll. We've invited someone who knows a lot about sleep and sleep as we age. So we are excited to welcome back Dr. Erin Cassidy-Eagle. Dr. Cassidy-Eagle is a clinical professor in psychiatry and behavioral science at Stanford University of Medicine. She has practiced as a clinical psychologist for more than 20 years and has a special interest in sleep, cognition, and mental health in older adults. Now, in the time of interest, please type your questions into the chat and we'll answer them at the end of this presentation. Let's welcome Dr. Cassidy-Eagle.
Thank you. And gosh, I probably can't say over 20. I probably have to say over 30 now. I'm really in the AARP age range zone. So
Wow, that's great. Thanks again, Dr. Cassidy-Eagle.
yeah. All right. Well, let's see. I'm going to jump right in. Okay, if I go ahead and share my slides.
Sure.
All right. You guys let me know that they look okay.
A-okay.
All right. Okay. Well, I've spoken about sleep to a lot of you over time, and so I wanted to mix it up today, but I'm still happy to take any questions about sleep because I love talking about sleep in any form, any parts of it. But today, I really feel in the folks I see every week, there's just a lot more stress and there's a lot more strain, whether it be because of my Southern California friends, fires, other things going on, things in the world we don't have control of, personal things, whether it be medical issues, loss, transitions. And so I really today want to talk about sleep and anxiety, but I also want to talk about the whole 24-hour day and really encourage people to do what they can to take care of themselves all day long because that actually helps your sleep too. So I'm going to go through it, and then always happy to take questions. Love those, to know what you'd really like to know more about. So I'm going to jump right in here. I'm going to just kind of do a quick review of sleep and stress, sleep's impact on your health, your brain, your emotions, some strategies, just some straightforward behavioral strategies to manage sleep, as well as your anxiety and worry if you're a worrier. And then kind of talk about maybe during the day, what are you doing during the day and how does that affect your sleep and just your overall well-being. I'm just foreshadowing here. I'm going to sneak in a little about mood and depression as well, which is really on the same continuum as anxiety, and just some strategies to think about improving your daytime hours as well. So I'm going to jump right in. You guys can flag me if you see some questions I should get to earlier. I'm always happy to be interrupted and jump into some of those. But otherwise, when you think of sleep, lack of sleep, now this could be, just you're getting less sleep. It could be your sleep is disrupted. You're waking up in the middle of the night. It could be you have a terrible time falling asleep. So lack of sleep involves lots of things. Sometimes it just involves you don't even notice a problem, but when you wake up, you just don't feel rested. You don't feel restored. Often when people have many, many days of this, I saw several of you saying every day, you might notice that you have more kind of mood swings that aren't typical of you. Maybe you feel a little more irritable. Maybe you're experiencing more symptoms of anxiety and depression, brain fog, trouble just kind of like focusing your attention. And I will, just a little side note, say, people when they're 30 experience that too. But we have this tendency when we're 70 and we have brain fog to think, oh no, is my brain failing? And really, it might just be because of sleep, but because you're 70 and not 30, we interpret it differently. So that's why I really like to address things that we know we can change, just because sometimes it really is just because of lack of sleep or other things to take care of yourself. But all in all those things put together make it really hard to manage stressful things as they happen. Now, when you're getting good sleep, we know in our sleep, sleep and especially REM sleep really helps with emotion regulation, improving our mood. It allows us the ability to kind of shift our thoughts away from maybe worries or fears. We have more sort of control over that. And just overall, our well-being feels improved. Just to do a quick review of why sleep is so important. One of the reasons I love it, and I'll just give a quick review here, is there's actually good research that says sleep even affects mortality rates. Specifically, the research has found duration. So we always recommend 6 to 9 hours. That's the window. But if you're less than 6, we know that's not great. It's not great for your health. It's not great for your brain. But at the same time, if you're over 9, we also know that actually has a deleterious effect on your health. And so I will say the sweet spot is 7 to 8 hours. Now, listen, we unfortunately can't usually dial in exactly how much we're going to get, but I think that middle zone is great. We get a little less sleep as we get older, but not too much. So if you slept 7.5 hours when you were 30, you're probably still sleeping 7 hours at 60. Chronotype plays a role. Now, this is a little more complicated, but we do know that sort of larks, those morning people, do a little bit better than owls. Now, what the research can't tell us is, let's face it, our world is designed around larks, our work schedules, volunteer schedules, activities, socialization. And so is it because we're trying to cram people who are owls into this other rhythm? Is that why they do poor? Like if they could live their life and sleep when they needed to sleep and do activities when you need to do, they haven't really answered that yet. And then regularity is important. So having a regular sleep schedule, not, getting up 3 hours later one day, 4 hours earlier next day, that disruption really throws your circadian rhythm off and your body, and it does affect your health and your ability to get good sleep. So I'll talk a little bit about that, but that's really important. Obesity, we know that leptin and ghrelin are the main hormones related to am I hungry or am I full? And both of those get screwed up in the wrong direction when you have disrupted sleep. cardiovascular disease, risk of heart disease goes up with disrupted sleep over time. Immune functioning, one of my favorite studies, and I don't mean to bore you, you guys have heard it before, is, if your sleep is disrupted the week before you get the flu shot, you develop 50% fewer antibodies when you get the shot than if your sleep was good. And so we know it affects our system down at the cellular level. So it's important. And of course, mental health, which is most important to me, but I'll talk a lot more about that. Now, same with cognition. I think we all want to keep our brains healthy, and we see the same pattern in studies looking at cognitive impairment that, folks sleeping, short sleep or over 9 hours are more at risk of cognitive decline. We want people to be regular sleepers. They add in napping in some of these studies. And so the evidence on napping is that naps are a lot of, you might talk to some sleep specialists and they'll say, they don't want any naps. I'm pro nap. I like them myself. It's just smarter to keep them short. So even if you have to set a little alarm, 30-minute nap, lie down, and take a nap. You could even do that twice a day if you really feel like you kind of need that for a second wind to get that energy. I know that it's disruptive to your sleep and your circadian rhythm if you're taking, 2.5-hour naps during the day, and they tend to make you feel worse. Now, the exception to that is, for example, I've worked with a lot of folks undergoing cancer treatment. There are times where we're recovering from surgery, and there's rest versus nap. Sometimes your body needs to rest, and it might need that several times a day. And if you're in recovery, sometimes maybe even you do need a little more sleep. And don't worry about that. Get that when you need it, when you're dealing with an illness. Those are the exceptions to that rule. You got to listen to your body and take care of yourself during those periods. So how can sleep help with stress? I think of it as a health and safety alert. It's kind of like waving the flag. When our sleep is disrupted, to me, that's saying something's going on. Something's going on. Now, if you've had poor sleep your whole life, then it can be something a little bit different. But if, let's say, your sleep is worse in the last couple of weeks, sometimes disrupted sleep is the first sign of you're getting sick. Sometimes it's just, hey, it just reminds you, I really am experiencing some stress. Sleep can even get disrupted with positive things, but I think it's just one of those things to notice and say, what's going on? And, we just know that sleep has such a positive impact on your physical, cognitive, and emotional health. In some ways, I like to think of sleep as, it's solidifying our memories. So, one of my favorite studies is you study all day for a test, and then maybe 5 o'clock, you take the test. Let's say instead of taking that test at 5 o'clock, you went to sleep for 8 hours. Then you got up and took the test. Guess what? You do 30% better the next day. Why is that? I like to describe sleep as it's your personal assistant that sorts everything and files it in your filing cabinet. It puts, it integrates information, it makes connections, it helps you sort things out, it solidifies memories, it organizes your brain. So, it really does these wonderful things for us. And best of all, really, is that you can actually do things to improve your sleep. There's some things in life that we know. And gosh, all my Southern California listeners and the fires and all these things going on around you, having spent some time in Southern California myself in the last year, as I have 2 college students down there, I really, saw a lot of that going on as well. And even if it doesn't impact you directly, being in that environment and around people dealing with difficult things is stressful. And so, to focus in on those things that you can do to take care of yourself. I think a lot of people, and I've loved how much compassion and empathy I feel like I hear from people. And we have to make sure we turn that around on ourselves. And sleep, exercise, taking care of yourself in terms of connecting with others, lowering your stress. That's just one way we can take care of ourselves. And I really want to encourage people today. My main message is take care of yourself as much as you try to take care of others. Now, when I think specifically about sleep advice, I always like people to see the whole picture. All these things affect each other. You know, you could be physical health, you could be suffering from pain. That's a big impact on sleep. Maybe you're going through an illness. Maybe you're just feeling overwhelmed emotionally. And then behaviors, you tend to stay in bed a little bit longer. Maybe you're doing a little less than normal. That also can give you more time to worry or ruminate if you have tendencies in that direction. And then maybe you start to say, oh gosh, I don't know what I can do to get good sleep. All these things affect each other, and they can affect each other in a negative way. Good thing is, you change one of these, it affects all the others in a positive way as well. So, you know, the behavioral approach to sleep, the CBT approach, as we call it, cognitive behavioral, really focuses on thoughts and behaviors. I'll start with some of the behavioral advice. Now, probably a lot of you have heard this advice, but if you have questions about specifics of it, just shout. But if someone says to me, what's the one thing that's most important to do? I would say get up at the same time every day. Now, listen, 45 minutes, you know, something happens, you have an appointment, one day you end up sleeping in a little later. But what that does is, even if initially you get a little less sleep, it'll help you sleep better the next night. And just regulating your circadian rhythm actually over time will really help your sleep improve, because it really trains your body to know when it needs to be asleep. Going to bed only when sleepy, instead of saying, hey, it's 9 o'clock, I got to go to bed, and maybe I just disclosed when I actually go to bed. But maybe instead of picking a time, I would rather people kind of pay attention to that. Try to get used to feeling, when am I sleepy, right? Because I hear a lot of people come to me and they say, gosh, I was dozing off in front of the TV and then I got in bed and I couldn't sleep. Well, that's because you dozed off in front of the TV and you took down your sleep drive. And so you got to build it back up to be able to fall asleep. But if you can start paying good attention to, hey, when am I sleepy? Maybe you're sleepier earlier than you typically go to bed, or maybe you're going to bed and lying there trying to count sheep and you're frustrated, and you're thinking, why am I not falling asleep? So try to start feeling, when do you naturally feel sleepy? Keeping that anchor in the morning of when you get up, go to bed when you're sleepy. I talked a little bit about naps already. I think just keep them short, and sometimes your body does need the rest. Creating a buffer zone. So what do I mean? So 45 minutes or so before sleep, we love these screens, but you got to put the screens down, especially the ones close to your face. If you need something like to watch something before bed, I will say TV is better than a phone or an iPad, because it's how close is that light to your eyes. And that's, if it's close to your eyes, it's alerting, it'll keep you awake and it'll make it hard to go to sleep. Plus, depending on what you're watching, think about what you're watching too. Better to watch an old movie, a new movie, anything that's positive, maybe even if it's, other interesting, life stories. I often say, gosh, if you're going to watch TV, probably don't watch news right before you go to bed. Most, especially these days, might find that arousing and get your mind working, and that makes it hard to fall asleep. So create this buffer zone. It could just even be your routine in the bathroom. It could be, I notice a lot of you meditate, stretch, do those things that help you kind of have that period before you get into bed that kind of get you to a more peaceful place. If you're in bed and you're not sleeping, instead of staying in bed and feeling frustrated, get out of bed, go do something boring. Like maybe you have a magazine, maybe it's somewhere in a comfortable chair with a blanket, make it appealing. Because I think this is the hardest advice to follow, is getting out of bed if you're not sleeping. Because we often say, hey, I'm comfortable, I'm warm, I don't want to get out of bed. But even if you have a comfortable chair next to your bed with a blanket and a soft light where you could read a book, don't read something too exciting because you'll want to finish it, but just something that you could do. And if you're in a lot of pain and it's really hard to get out of bed, sometimes I'll just say sit up in bed, try to put try to get into a different position, because what we don't want to do is associate being awake and frustrated with being in bed. We want it to be a place of peace and sleep. So getting out of bed and doing that somewhere else until you feel sleepy is good. And then over time, you'll kind of notice how much time you actually sleep. If you have one of these fancy devices on your wrist, you might already know day to day. and think about, okay, I want to spend about the same amount of time in bed as I do asleep. And what people tend to do is a lot of folks that come to me for help will say, gosh, I get in bed, but I stay in bed later and I realize, wow, they're in bed for 10 hours, but they're only asleep 7. But then they're frustrated that they're awake for 3 when they're actually getting enough sleep, but they're frustrated with it. And so pay attention to, gosh, could you be relaxing somewhere outside of bed for some of those 3 hours so that you don't have that situation. Now, shifting to sort of anxiety, and I will say a lot of these that I kind of want to talk about really focus on things you can do once you're in bed. A lot of times people say, what do I do once I'm in bed and I can't sleep? I'm anxious, my mind's spinning. So these mostly focus on that, but the next part I want to talk about, what about the rest of the time before you go to bed? So some of these you might have tried, and if people feel like putting it in the chat, you may have some ideas I don't have on here, and or ones that are on here that you really find useful. Feel free to put those in the chat. Weighted blankets. I will say particularly people that suffer from anxiety, insomnia, and autism seem to benefit. There's studies that they actually sleep better with a weighted blanket. Masks, especially if you're in a hospital environment or someplace with lights you can't control, because we like to keep it dark. If you're in a place that's warm and or you're just having trouble calming down or cooling off, sometimes even a cool washcloth over your eyes or over your forehead helps your body relax. Background noise can help, whether it be white or pink noise, nature sounds, waves. There's lots of things on the phone. There's devices that have these. I had one patient really share, he said, you told me not to look at a screen. I don't want to look at my phone to turn on an app. So he uses Alexa in the middle of the night. Hey, Alexa, play my guided meditation, play, ocean sounds. And so then he doesn't have to turn on a light. He doesn't have to touch anything, and he's able to go back to sleep. Now, I'm not saying get an Alexa, but if you can have something set up that's easy, even if it is a machine by your bed that you can turn on, that has different sounds, there are those devices, or it's an app on your phone that you kind of already have on that you can just hit play. Minimize the amount you have to do to have these things if you do find those helpful. I'd say people mostly use them when they're falling asleep. So sleep stories, guided relaxation. There's so many apps now, Calm, Headspace. Insight Timer is a free one that has a lot of those same things, and breathing exercises that I think is a great one. Skipping down to the breathing, the 4-7-8 breath. You can even Google 4-7-8 breath if you want to find a video of it. The idea is to really quickly calm your nervous system down. And so you breathe in for a count of 4, you hold your breath for a count of 7, and you breathe out for a count of 8. And when you have a moment, we won't do it right now, but try that. Do it 3 times, and you might really notice how much it really calms your body down. Now, if you have trouble holding your breath, you don't have to do it for 7. You don't have to do it at all. The key thing here that really helps is that your exhale is longer than your inhale. Something about that really sends a message to our central nervous system and just slows everything down. Some folks like to really find that when they lie down, their minds start to, that the hamster wheel starts going. They start thinking about stuff, worrying about what am I going to do tomorrow? Am I going to be late? Is this going to get better? Should I call this person? Sometimes for folks doing that, they have something called cognitive shuffling. It's kind of a new form of counting sheep, I think. So maybe you think of any word. Okay, and the first one I came up with was silly. And then you come up with as many words that you can think of that start with S. And you can think of any word and then just pick the first letter and do that exercise. You can also count backwards from 100. I will say I tried it in an MRI myself, and it really helped me not focus on the loud, horrible noise that was stressing me out. So, so it can really help distract you. And really the point of those things is let's get your mind to focus on something other than what you're thinking about that's keeping you awake. We want to distract you away from that. So as silly as some of these things sound, they can really work to do that, get you focusing on something else. Visual imagery, sometimes I have people, they might think of maybe it's a place you vacationed. Maybe it's a home you lived in that you loved that you don't live in anymore. Maybe it's a place you visited. Maybe it's a meal you had with someone special. Think of something, imagine that place, and then give yourself a mental tour in great detail, all the different things, and just think through that. And sometimes that just can bring some just positive thoughts as well. I'm going to talk next about one of my favorites, which is called constructive worry. But just another thing I like is practicing gratitude. I think that's always, anytime, what we know about the brain now is neuroplasticity is a real thing. We can actually train our brains to do certain things. And so shifting in the moment to the positive, it can sometimes feel like a heavy lift, but the more you do it, the more you can meditate or practice gratitude or get you to do something that calms you or something you enjoy, the more our nervous system is affected by that, it's calmed by it. And over time, it actually becomes easier and easier to shift yourself into that place, even when stress happens. And really, that's a definition of resilience. How do we get ourselves so that when we're faced with things that are tough or stressful, can we shift into a place where we're responding as opposed to reacting? And by that, I mean respond, and kind of think about, problem solve, decide what to do, but also move on, as opposed to reacting. It comes more from a place of panic or fear. We want to shift ourselves into a calmer place. So one idea of gratitude, something I do, something I've tried even, and I will say I do it when I wake up in the morning, but you can absolutely do it as you're falling asleep at night, is inside your mind, I simply say to myself, thank you. And then my mind goes where it goes. And I would love for you guys to try it and see what happens to you. When I do it, my mind goes to all the things I love, the things in my life that I'm grateful for. And there's something about that that just shifts you. So I do it in the morning, and then I hop out of bed, get the toothbrush going. But there's something about it. It shifts me to positive right at the beginning of the day, but I think you can do it at night too. I will say we've even noticed people that have nightmares or maybe dreams of stressful things, that if you can do some positive exercise as you're falling asleep, that can help with that. It's something we do actually a lot with children who have nightmares. We have them change those stories into some positive story and think about them and talk about them, and then they go to bed, and it can change what you actually dream about. So just something to think about trying that I love and is really easy. So I've talked about this before. I'll kind of go through fast. I don't want to bore the folks that have seen it before, but if you're a worrier and you have things on your mind, even if it's just a long to-do list that you just feel overwhelmed by, take a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle of it. On one side, we have concerns. On the other side, we have solutions. So you write down a concern like, hey, I need to fix my oven or whatever it may be. What's the next step you're going to take to do that? Maybe it's you're going to ask around for advice on who people use for that service, or you're going to do a search for who are the local folks that do stuff like that. You write that down. Then the next concern, and sometimes maybe it's something that you can fix completely in one step. Write that down. Sometimes it's not even really a big problem, and once you write it down, you say, should I even have this on the list? Write down, no, this isn't really a problem. I got bigger things to deal with. Or maybe you write something down, you say, I don't even know what the first step is. Write that down. And then maybe also write, you know what, maybe talk to a friend and see what their advice is on what I should do. But the idea is that you record all these things that are on your mind spinning, but do it during the day. Maybe it could be in the evening hours, but don't do it right before bed. I'd rather you do it maybe in the afternoon, and then fold that piece of paper up, put it on your bedside table. And when you go to bed, if you start worrying or you wake up in the middle of the night and you start thinking about stuff, say to yourself, hey, when my brain functioning was at its prime during the day, I set a plan. I set a plan of what to do. and I'm going to follow that plan. And, right now my thinking isn't going to be at its best. So I'm just going to know I've got it written down. I got a plan for tomorrow. Sometimes people need to do it every day. Sometimes they just need to do it for a week. So find a way to get those worries. And I included the instructions if people want to take a picture, but I also want to say, if you email me, I'm happy to send you the form if you want to print one out. But that it has all the instructions. I know the slide is impossible to read. So either a photo or just make me send it to you. I'm happy to do that. But just some way of getting that worry out of your bed and into your day. It doesn't make the problems go away, but it gives you a shot at handling them when your mind is really thinking at its prime. Because, when you try to solve a problem at 4 a.m., it tends to, if others have found this, not be solvable, and you kind of end up in this, it just kind of drags on and it makes you feel worse and worse. So if you're someone who does that, this is one thing to try that I really like. I didn't come up with it. I credited the folks on the bottom there, but I really like it. All right. Well, now to kind of shift. Okay, what about the rest of your day? Now, the things I'm going to talk about include depression and anxiety. I will say there's often a continuum. Some people lean towards more depression, some anxiety. I will say everybody has some of both. So there's nothing, broken about you if you have this. I think it's real normal to have reactions to things. And it's just, what can we do to take care of ourselves? So think about, what do you do when you're awake? I think when people are under stress, and again, I think about all the fires in Southern California, also a lot of stuff going on around us in the world right now, that, it really, for some people, I think it's caused them to kind of withdraw, maybe, avoid certain things, maybe, it's just affecting their sleep, but it often affects what you're doing during the day too. And I've noticed a lot of people kind of isolating a little bit more, um, just trying to cope with this. And what do we notice? We notice, now you could sub in anxiety here and it works the same, that, when you tend to feel bad about something and you're trying to cope with it, you tend to do a little less. And then as you do less, you don't feel great about that because you're like, all the shoulds start coming out. You start shoulding on yourself, as someone said to me once. I should get out, I should exercise, I should call this friend, but you feel worse, you do less, then you do even less, and you feel worse. And it's this spiral. It's hard to break that spiral. So one of my favorite things to do with people, and maybe some of you have heard of it, it's called behavioral activation. What does that mean? That's like, how do we get ourselves engaged and sort of back in the game, even if it's in a small way? Can you make small changes during the day to just add in some care for yourself, some pleasant activities? When I talked about making this shift, that it really does impact your nervous system and your brain, to be putting yourself into a pleasant state. So to really push through your avoidance, and sometimes that's hard, but I say start small. You could pick one tiny thing. Listen, some of the activities you could pick have a cup of coffee every day, right? This is the perfect meeting to do it at. Well, and honestly, if we could have the AARP team call us every morning with that intro they do and cheer us all up, I feel like that could get me going every day. But I have a feeling they might have other things to do, so we'll have to create that for ourselves. But something that does make you feel pleasant. You know what? Even just sitting with your pet, petting your dog, petting your cat. Spending time with a friend. They can be very small things, and they can be things you do on your own initially if that feels more comfortable. When folks say, well, what should I do? How do I pick what to do? How do I make this list? I think everyone should make a list. I actually like people to think about their values. So this is one questionnaire I give to folks in a group I run. And I say, this lists a whole bunch of things: friends, family, marriage, parenting, growth and education, maybe lifelong learning activities, recreation activities, maybe you have a spiritual practice, maybe it's volunteering, doing things in the community. It could be simply physical self-care, like working on, changing your diet, adding in some exercise, or working on your sleep. So look at the list, and there's much longer lists online, but if you think about, I like it, I like to keep it simple. You know, I have people rate what's the most important to you and what are you not doing enough of? And I'll tell you, the number one people say often is physical self-care. They might be, you know, supporting their adult children. They may be supporting their spouse. They may be doing some volunteer work, but maybe they're not taking care of themselves. I will say that's one of the things we most neglect. And so figure out what do you value that you're not doing enough of, and you can pick that area and make a list of things, even just 2 things that might help you further along that path. I think create a mix of activities. So some of them are just fun. You know, maybe you watch your favorite movie. Some of them are meaningful, you know, maybe spirituality and helping family, rewarding. Honestly, I had someone, she sounded the happiest she'd been in a month because she cleaned out her garage because it was so satisfying. And as silly as that sounds, sometimes the activities aren't maybe what you think, but they do make you feel, it sort of gets you into the movement. It starts some momentum in this direction of taking care of yourself. And if it's hard to do anything, just do one thing to start. Pick one thing one day. But we know from research, Dr. Dolores Gallagher Thompson, if any of you have ever had the pleasure listening to her, she researched this and she wanted to figure out how many things do you have to do. And she came up with, if you do 4 pleasant events a day, you keep the blues away. And so that could be having your favorite coffee, you know, loving on one of your pets. Maybe it's having lunch with a friend. Maybe it's something bigger. Maybe you can go on a trip. Maybe you can't. So, you know, it could be a range of things. But if you choose them and then push yourself to do them, there is this cycle that gets created that you start to feel like, wait, when I do these things, my mood is better. When I do 4 things in a day, I notice that day is a better day. When I'm headed to sleep, I feel better. And when you feel that control, I think that mastery, it helps you realize that you have the power to shift, lower your anxiety, improve your mood, focus on health. And we all get stuck when things challenge us, whether it be a new medical diagnosis, whether it be pain. So, you know, finding ways to adapt, as I say, the changing weather. You know, like I love the AARP, the LA Soul Steppers. I love that they, you know, gosh, maybe you don't want to walk in high heat. So they go to a mall and walk. And then you can kind of people watch. And so they find ways to adapt things they want to do to make them possible, make them comfortable. Maybe you don't want to go to a movie theater, but maybe you can make sure you have a copy of your 10 favorite movies. You know, if you could have what I like to call toolbox of things, and it may just be a list of things that you can go to when you know you're struggling, that you'd be surprised at how much that also affects your sleep. And then I kind of want to close with what I've noticed, and then I'm happy to take more sleep questions, of course, is I've noticed over the last several decades, there's been this shift. And the World Health Organization isn't the only one with these definitions. I will say in psychiatry, I see it in positive psychology, that there's this shift that, you know what, health, let's think about health not as preventing illness or treating infirmity. Let's think about it as what can we do to grow, to make our lives better. You know, there's this real focus on shifting to, we're not treating disease. Let's focus on expanding our health, our life, what we do to make things better. And I think you don't have to have a diagnosis or a problem to do this, but really this focus on positive things you can do. Like, for example, I run a wellness group, and I do that because I think anybody in any state with any condition can come up with things that they want to do to better their life and better their sleep, and you know, that really, you know, kind of the closing idea of shifting to have more moments of positive feelings, of feeling safe, of feeling peace during the day, even if they're just short moments. The more of those you have, it really actually affects your nervous system. It strengthens those connections in the brain. You don't often think that it has that power, but over time, the more you do it and more moments you have, then what happens is when you are exposed to stress or things are happening, it's a little easier. It's like building a muscle, a positive muscle. It's easier to go back and use those tools that have helped you. And then it becomes, hopefully at some point, a default option. So when stress happens, you can fall back into that positive place. And honestly, that's what they call resilience. That's really what they mean, is how do we, when we're faced with these things, pull ourselves back into a positive place? And I hope that you can all do that, because right now, honestly, I think that we all need this positivity and care in our lives. And I really hope that folks can do just even something small to get there, not only sleep better, but feel better overall. So I'm going to shut up now so I can answer a few questions. So tell me, you guys help me out, or let's see, I'll try to open the chat here, but.
Yeah, I've got you covered here. Dr. Cassidy-Eagle, okay, we've got a bunch of questions from the chat. A lot of them seem to revolve around going to sleep and then waking up early, like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and then not being able to fall back asleep due to
Yeah.
various reasons, like their mind's racing or they just can't fall back asleep. So can you speak to that?
Yes. So if you think about how much do you sleep? And so what I notice is that as folks tend to feel sleepy earlier, let's say you're going to bed at 9 and you generally sleep about 7 hours, which is actually a wonderful amount of sleep, then you're going to wake up around 4 a.m. and you're actually getting good enough sleep. It's just, gosh, people say, well, I don't want to get out of bed at 4 a.m. And so the only way around that is if you can try to make the commitment to stay up later, because that you're not going to get more sleep, but you can shift when it happens. So maybe you go for a walk in the evening instead without sunglasses and get some light exposure. And that will increase your alertness, help you stay up a little bit later. So let's say you go to bed at 11, then you'll probably sleep till 6. And maybe that feels like a more human time to get up for the day. So it's really, how early are you going to bed? Now, if you're waking up at 3 a.m. and you went to bed at midnight, then we have other things to talk about, right? Then you're not getting enough sleep, and I want to know what else is going on in your life, and are you sleeping during the day? And I'll have other questions. But in general, if you look at that window of when you sleep, you can move it. Now, let's say you have trouble waking up in the morning, you're the opposite, and you feel kind of groggy. That's another good time. You get light in the morning, and it'll wake you up and help you feel more alert. If you're somebody who kind of wakes up and says, I kind of want to stay in bed, I kind of want to get more sleep, then maybe it'd be good for you to go sit by a bright window, go sit in your yard, use a light box. You can buy them on Amazon now. It's real easy to use those tools. But if you need to stay up later, get that light in the evening.
Now, I've read or heard that as we age, a lot of times we need less sleep as we get older. Is that something that's proven, or is?
Yes, so we do get a little less sleep, but I always like to tell people, it's not dramatic. So like I say, it's probably 30 to 40 minutes left than what you got in midlife. So yeah, it is a little less. I think what people have more of a complaint about is we do get lighter sleep. And I usually go into that more and wanted to give you guys something new today. But as we get older, we stay in lighter sleep. We get less deep sleep. So by the time you're in your 70s, only about 5% of your sleep is deep. So when you're in lighter sleep, things wake you up easier. And so that's disruptive. You wake up and you're frustrated that you're awake. And so it's that disruption that I think makes people feel like, some people say to me, I'm not sleeping at all. But then when we put them in a sleep lab, we realize actually they are getting a good amount of sleep. It's just lighter, so it doesn't always feel as good. So the more you can kind of consolidate it and just have that period of how long do you sleep, stay in bed for that period, then at least you'll get the most solid sleep. Now, I will say people smarter than me are working on tools to actually increase deep sleep through like brain stimulation, different exercises. So I'm hoping they come up with some good stuff that is easy for people to try that will increase the amount of deep sleep we get, because that has other good functions for our body and brain. But yeah, for now, it's just know that you may still be getting good enough sleep.
So, do you recommend? I've seen these apps and things that you can, or wearables that monitor how well you sleep and how much deep sleep you're getting versus light sleep.
Yeah.
Is that worth doing?
So I think for some people it's interesting. When I say I caution about it is some people become obsessed with it. And every day they're going, oh no, I didn't get enough sleep. I'm going to feel terrible today. We don't want to use it like that. Because then guess what? You're going to feel terrible no matter what. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So, and if somebody says, oh no, I only got 5% deep sleep. Now these wearables, they can't monitor your brain waves. It's not like, an EMG, EKG that you would get in a sleep lab. So it's an estimate of how much deep sleep you're getting. It's not exact. And so although those the devices are getting better every year, that it's still an estimate. So don't, make life or death decisions about the numbers. But also if you find that looking at those numbers is making you more concerned or stress more, then it's not helping. It's kind of like clock watching, do less of it. If you find that it's reassuring to you, hey, okay, I'm getting some good sleep. I'm also getting good activity during the day because you use it for steps, then I think they're fantastic. And so just be careful to not, if they're negatively impacting how you think about it. And know that it's natural as we get older. One thing that does drop off significantly. So maybe you got 20 to 30% deep sleep when you were 20, and we get 5% when we're older. There's not a lot you can do to change that. It's going to fluctuate a little bit over time, but don't let that ruin your day.
All right. Now,
Yeah.
a few people are asking about, as we get older, we naturally have to use the restroom a little more often. So we
Yeah.
wake up in the middle of the night, maybe every 2 to 3 hours to go to the
Yes.
bathroom. Is that ruining our sleep cycle? And is there anything we can do? Should
Yeah.
we be concerned?
This is so common, and I have to tell you, this is one of the subjects I love to talk about in group because I think people often feel like it's just them, and then they realize, wait, no, everybody else has this problem. It's just one of those things people don't talk about, how to handle it, how to manage it. Yes, it's normal. So if you have there are medications. I like that to be last resort. I like to decrease fluid intake for 3 to 4 hours before you go to bed. Now, we don't want to be dehydrated, but really slow it down because your body's moving a little slower, some of the processes. So, if you don't want to have a full glass of water before you go to bed. So decrease the fluid right before this couple hours before bed. And then I will say the more solid your sleep is. So when I had people spend a little less time in bed and they were more solidly asleep, it tended to wake them up less. Sometimes you get into that habit that you're so sensitive to it. If you wake up to it and you even feel it a little that the bell goes off a little bit, then it's impossible to try to sleep because you're just thinking about that. So it is normal to get up several times a night as we get older to sleep, but decreasing the fluids and then just trying to spend that focused time in bed. I will say some people that have real issues, maybe they can't get to the bathroom and, quickly enough, maybe where, okay, depends. These things are a lot better than they used to be. They look a lot better. They're a lot more standard. A lot of people use them. They don't talk about them. Maybe it's a bedside commode. You want to be safe. You don't want to have an accident, run into the bathroom. You don't want to also trip on things. So make sure there's, no tripping hazards between you and the bathroom, that you have low lighting in the bathroom. So not the overhead light if you can do it, because that really wakes you up. But yeah, there's lots of things and people don't talk about it enough. It is something most people deal with.
Do you have any suggestions for if we wake up in the middle of the night and we just are so anxious about something and our mind is racing? How do we calm our mind so we can go back to sleep again?
So a lot of those tools we talked about, the breathing, sometimes people even do progressive muscle relaxation. Maybe you tense your arms and then you relax them, and then you tense them and relax them. Maybe do the same thing with your toes. Now you don't want to end up, if you have pain, you want to be careful what part of your body you do that with. Some of those other tools, that cognitive reshuffling, it's how do we get our mind onto something else? But if those things don't work and you're lying there 15, 20 minutes, you can kind of tell when, hey, I'm so stressed or this has really captured me. I have people often get up in the middle of the night and they go and they maybe watch 30 minutes of TV. You got to have, or they read a book. Even better if there's a book or magazine. You got to do something to force your mind to shift to something else. Otherwise, we all know when there's something really grabbing us, it's hard to get away from it. So yeah.
Absolutely. And some people have used the radio to help fall asleep.
Yes, and I will say with TV, I have people that say TV or radio, they fall asleep to it. Okay, here's the thing though, especially with the TV, the light and even the sound can keep us in lighter sleep. Like if you have the TV playing all night. So you know what I tell people to do is get a timer. You know, like the timers you use on lights, plug your TV into a timer, set it for 45 minutes or whatever it takes you to fall asleep, and then it'll turn off on its own because I want you to still get the deep sleep you're going to get, which probably is in the first third to half of the night. So, you know, keeping it on all night like a radio, your brain will kind of track it a little bit and it stays a little more aroused and you're not as relaxed. But there's no reason why you can't. If you really need to fall asleep with it, just set a timer so it'll go off. Yeah.
All right, one last question because we're just about out of time. Can you speak to melatonin?
Yeah, melatonin is one of those, I think, really safe things to try. I will say, you know, because it's not regulated, you know, sometimes get a good quality melatonin if you can. I work with a nutritionist who likes a lot of the products at Costco, I will say, or Nature Made or different, but, you know, get one because when they studied them and looked at the amounts that were actually in it, they varied a lot. 3 to 5 milligrams is a real standard dose. I will say more isn't more. So if you say one night, I'm going to take 10, that's not necessarily great or going to help you more, but I think it is usually a safe thing to try. I also say if you're on other medications, good to tell your doctor you're on it. They generally will have no concerns with it. But and then one last thing, CBD has become very popular for sleep. And I will say now we do have more research and we know that there may be a good use for CBD products, gummies for anxiety and pain. But I will tell you what we know is it actually harms your sleep. It's kind of like, think of it like alcohol. It'll help you fall asleep, but it actually disrupts your sleep in the middle of the night and your sleep is a little bit poorer with it. So it's not great for sleep. And I have a lot of people who've used it for sleep, but we're finding from research now, that for sleep, I generally don't recommend it. So
Great. That's great to know. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Cassidy-Eagle. We are just about out of time for questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all the questions in the chat. Joyce, back to you.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Cassidy-Eagle. I've learned so much about managing anxiety. So now, hopefully, I'm going to take all your tips and maybe I could use them. And I'll definitely let you know what's going on about that one. But great information. Again, thank you so much.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Good sleep.
So we're getting ready to, thank you so much. And I know people will be contacting you later, so don't worry about that. We'll make sure we filter it out. So let's join us for our next month's Tea and Coffee Tuesday, which will be August the 12th at 9 o'clock Pacific time. We have Senior Inspector Jason Colson will be discussing living and traveling alone safely. He will be sharing insights on tips from his over 25 years of law enforcement and this worldwide travel, which is very definitely right now it's summertime, so make sure that you come and see that one. And later this month, on July the 24th at 9 o'clock, Piggy Bank Essentials is delighted to present Bernard Gelfsman to talk about the power of, believe it or not, the power of documents and what they are and their limitations and how you can consider using them and set them up. If you would like to view our previous programs or learn more about the Tea and Coffee Tuesday monthly series, check out our link in the chat. Again, thank you, Dr. Erin Cassidy-Eagle, for being our speaker. Thank you to our Tea and Coffee volunteers, Connie, Sarita, Harash, Vince, and of course, Jacqueline. And as well as our AARP staff. And thank you again for joining us. We hope you learned something, and we hope you learned something that'll help you sleep a lot better. I am your AART volunteer host, Joyce Howard, and thank you again for joining us. This concludes our program for today. And hopefully you'll sleep better this evening. Have a good day.